CEO, American Eagle Gold, AE, on the TSX-V. The only two letters you need to know, A and E. Tony, a lot of things to get to today. I want to start going back in time a little bit here. South 32 has made a very big investment in the company, now becoming a 19.9% shareholder in American Eagle. And I want to get your sense, because a lot of people don't know what it feels like to be a junior mining CEO and have these kinds of accomplishments occur in a relatively short period of time. So I just want to get your sense for how does it feel to close that investment, and what has changed for the company in the last month?
Look, it obviously feels really good. It's a big team effort. Charlie, Neil, my late uncle, obviously, the Rocks did the talking. So first and foremost, they invested because they liked the property. It was a process similar to Teck, probably 5 or 6 months in the making, but, from, term sheet to closing, it was very, very fast. So that was interesting. I think the big thing for us is, you're always a little bit bootstrapped. You're always a little bit constrained by your cost of capital. I think right now we're kind of transitioning from your typical junior mining company, that's always got to, drill for the best assays or get the stock up, to an actual company that has 3 years of cash of operations money in its bank. Like, we're going to drill as much next year that we drilled in the previous 3 years combined. So, we can prove this thing out. I don't think it's a question of, if. I think the question is, what is the scale, and, how high grade can it be? We've obviously found something, and now we're working on, finding the source of, what we visually saw in 33, 35, 38, and just building this thing, all around that clock, that, blue sky donut, as, Steve and I coined it. And I think a lot of people looked at our company and they saw that we were kind of contained to this main zone. Again, a lot of that's cost of capital. But don't be fooled. We'll be drilling all around, and we'll be seeing how big this is in the upcoming years. So a big change. It obviously feels good, but with that cash, there's a lot of expectations, and we have the team to find it if it's there, and we think it's there.
So South 32 is a pretty big company. Their market cap is above 10 billion right now. Teck is a very big company. Their market cap is about 25 billion. They're both big shareholders. What can you tell us about Teck? And can you say anything about whether or not they wanted to participate in the financing, or what their thoughts are as a shareholder at this point in time?
Look, I think as a shareholder, like everyone else, I think that they're happy with the investment. To do a $29 million investment with one investor that's going to hold on to your shares and not create downwards pressure on the price, which is typical for, most juniors when they do the private placements at a discount with a warrant. I think from a shareholder perspective, they're very happy. I don't want to speak for them, but if I kind of put my feet in their shoes, they obviously, like any other company, want to be the only, company in town, but they know we need the capital. We got to raise capital for our shareholders. I think a lot of people think like, we did this to play Teck and South 32 against each other, which, maybe down the line it's going to be the case. But for us, bringing South 32, like I mentioned, the most important thing was finding a shareholder that's going to hold on to your shares, and then finding another shareholder that can actually help you make that discovery. And South 32, because they put so much investment in there, they have a financial reason to lend us resources and help us make this discovery, as fast as possible. So it helps us fast forward everything. And, to answer your question about whether Teck wanted to participate or not, I believe that they did. I just think for, financial reasons, they didn't really have to. I think we did such a good deal for our shareholders. I think the difference between them having 12-1 and 15-3 was really no big difference, because, like I've mentioned a bunch of other times, there was no ROFR in this deal. So for them, they, still have access to a data room. They're still helping us out technically, and they just save a little bit of money. But I think geologically, I think they probably would have wanted to participate, but they're run by essentially ex-BHP guys, so maybe they have a different mandate up top.
Okay. Let's turn to Neil. Neil, I looked at the news on, what was that, Tuesday morning? Yeah, Tuesday morning. And something stood out to me, and I want your thoughts on it. Hole 2430, I noticed that the moly grades started going up at about 400 meters down hole, and they strengthened to the end of the hole. That is very notable to me, and I'm interested in your thoughts on that. And then the second part of the question, in the commentary on hole 2430, you noted that there is potential for another porphyry center lying to the north and east of hole 2430. What can you tell us about those two things?
Well, it's really encouraging to see the moly creep up at depth in hole 30. And that's actually very, very similar to what we see happening in hole 17 and hole 8 and hole 11, which are to the west of the south zone. And then there's a bit of a gap in the middle where the mineralization isn't as strong. I mean, it's still present, but it looks like there's maybe some hotter centers or some where we're proximal to a separate source. And this might be that later stage driver of the system that's bringing in the moly and the gold, because we know there's an association in some of these deeper holes, or some of these deeper parts of these holes, with increases in moly grade and increases in gold grade. And we're actually seeing, now that we're getting more information down deep in this north zone, we're seeing a lot of similarities to the mineralization style and the overall association of copper, gold, and moly, in both the north zone and deeper in the south zone. So that stands out to me as very, very interesting and potentially indicative of, either a separation and offset or two separate driving systems. So that's, kind of the thinking there. It needs more drilling down there to get more information.
So based upon the visuals that you see in the holes, this higher tenor part of hole 2430, there's a section of 61 meters grading 0.71% copper equivalent, about 600 meters down hole. The visuals of that area, how do they align with some of the holes like 33 and 35? I mean, are you seeing more core that looks like that in those holes?
The mineralization in hole 30 particularly is a lot more, it bears a lot more of a resemblance to what we see in hole 12 and hole 4, right? So it's dominantly mineralized conglomerate. And then when we get down deeper into the stock in hole 30, which is still quite strong, it's just our more typical bornite stringer, bornite fracture, chalcocite in with the bornite, in the porphyry stock intrusive. So it's mineralized conglomerate, the odd interval of very strongly mineralized diking, and then mineralized Bavian porphyry intrusive. As we get a bit further to the north, the mineralization style in 33 is different. There is a pretty unique within the NAC system to date zone of what looks to be epithermal style quartz and chalcopyrite veining, quite extensively throughout part of 33. So it'll be really interesting to see how that comes back in comparison. And then 35 is different still, right? The mineralization we're the most excited about in 35, at least visually, is in a serriate texture, bleached, much more felsic looking intrusive rock, which hosts disseminations, and the veining actually is much, much lower in that. It's, even over a relatively short distance away, these are very different things we're seeing in these holes.
Very interesting. So you haven't really, figured out what's going on here yet. I mean, the theory is maybe there's a separate center to the north, but you're not sure you found it yet.
Either a separate center or the main pathways that's driving the fluid from the system, is channelizing a lot of the mineralizing fluids along these areas in the south and the north. And so the more we find of this, the better chance we have of chasing this back to source.
Okay. I mean, we could go to Tony, or, you could take this. So what are the thoughts on a winter program right now? What are you thinking about that? That was a possibility that was thrown out a few weeks ago. What's the latest on that?
I think before South 32 came in, I think we were for sure going to do a winter program. I think we have a tiger by the tail here, and the plan was to do a raise. We have to drill a lot more next year, and we'd have about $8 million in the bank, and we would need more than that. Obviously, it costs more to drill in the winter, especially when it's trying to support a camp now that Canfor left. But I think right now it's probably 50-50. I think we're going to wait till our assays come out, figure out the cost of capital, do our technical committees with Teck and South 32 and see what makes the most sense for us.
Yeah, and maybe I can speak operationally to that a little bit. It looks like there's some significant talks in the region to get Canfor's lumber tenures transferred into different hands so that activity can still happen up there. And so right now, while that's happening, there's not a lot of activity on the logging front this winter. There may well be a lot more activity next winter. And then that keeps road maintenance contractors employed up in the region. It keeps the barge going. It keeps the camp open. And then it becomes a lot more efficient to be doing a winter program for us. Whereas this season, we'd be funding all of that by ourselves. And so, yeah, it's just, it's certainly not the most bang for buck for the shareholders going in right now. But again, it all depends on scale, right? Like if we can put together something that makes sense to have enough people in there to keep camp open, then we're not subsidizing the empty rooms.
I see. Okay. So when do you think you'll make that call?
Wait till assays are out. So obviously, I think post roundup. I think all the assays will probably be done and probably in January, and I think we'll spend a few weeks trying to analyze it and work with South 32 and see what's next. So probably in the next month we'll have a better idea if we're going to be going back in the winter.
Okay.
I think the other thing is, it is really expensive to drill. Each hole, if you're drilling 900 meter holes, are anywhere from 300,000 to 400,000. So it's not like we're not going to be spending money in the off season. We're doing some modeling. We're bringing another porphyry expert in to analyze our core, and we're looking at some, more expensive geophysics that will help us kind of pinpoint some of these sources of mineralization. So that's kind of money well spent. And, if it helps you put those, Lamborghini holes in a better space, maybe that's the best cost of your capital. But, all kind of things that we're currently analyzing, on the fly. And I think, Neil mentioned there could be multiple centers, and you mentioned that too, but we still only drilled about 20% of our, our targets here. And, maybe there's 2 centers, but maybe there's 7 or 8. So, for me, the bigger picture is exploring and finding the systems, responsible for introducing, the mineralization. We have a good indication now with the 2024 program. So it's just about the scope and when we're going to go after it.
Okay. So I'm counting 8 holes still pending assays. Is that correct?
I believe so. Is that right, Neil? Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think this is going to, look like? Is this going to be out in 2 sets of results or 3 sets of results? And do you think we'll get another set of results by the end of the year?
I'm hoping at least one set of results by the end of the year. You'll probably have 2 or 3 different news releases. We want to feed the beast, keep people interested. It's easier to explain a story when you have 2 or 3 holes as opposed to 11 holes, all at once. And you got to keep people interested. I want to point out there's another company right next to us, and they finished their drilling, before we even started. They still haven't put out news. So I think we do a pretty good job of spreading it out and kind of introducing people to the story and explaining, why we hit something, what it means for us. And if we miss, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It still helps kind of solve the puzzle and explain to people, why we quote unquote missed, why that's helping us kind of hit something else. So we like to keep it in, smaller batches, not one at a time, but 2, 3, 4, and give the news out gradually. And, we've done a pretty good job of that in the last couple of months. We've had news come out every 2 or 3 weeks on a pretty steady basis, whether it's announcing drill holes, announcing a deal, announcing a close, etc.
So in 2025, you said more meters in total in 2025 will be drilled than were drilled in 2022, 2023, and 2024 put together. So does that mean you're going to go up to 5 rigs in 2025, or are you just going to have 3 and you're just going to...
I think so. We drilled about 6,900 in year 1, 7,000 year 2, and call it 16,000 year 3 for combined 30,000 meters. I think it's conceivable that we can hit 30,000 meters in 2025, and with that, you need 3 rigs. And with 3 rigs, you can own the camp, and you can drill from end of May all the way throughout the year as long as we want. And who knows, we might drill for 12 straight months. But again, we have to see, and if we keep on hitting robust stuff, there's no reason to stop. But again, it's all about cost of capital. And who knows, maybe someone else comes in down the way. Maybe a Japanese company comes in and takes a 10% equity stake for an offtake. I think that's kind of like the next big step. And we've seen that a lot of different times where, Sumitomo, one of these Japanese, forget what they're called. They come in and invest. Sumitomo just did a big investment in Australia, as you mentioned the other day on Twitter Spaces.
Yeah, but so you guys have 40 million in the treasury now, right?
Well, look, we have 37 million, but if you spend that, you get all those hard dollars we got from South 32, and whatever agreements was, every dollar we got from South 32 has got to go into the ground. So you take that 27 million, you get 30% refund each year from the BC government. That actually rolls over to about $42 million. So the money we actually have to spend at NAC is closer to 50 as opposed to 37.
I see. Back to Neil. So obviously there's a hole still pending. You got to get those results back. You got to plan the next drill program. But based upon what you know right now, Neil, if you had 3 rigs on site, where would you be stepping out to?
Yeah, we'd be doing, we've had a lot of success with the staged step outs from known areas, right? And we keep doing that in a systematic fashion. That just helps minimize the risk, and it helps us model things as we go. And I think after this off season, with the work we're doing, integrating the geochemistry and the abundance of geological information we have now, we're going to be in a much better position to continually do that. So I envision, and again, this is early days, but I envision 2 rigs, continuing the more systematic step outs out to the northeast and to the southeast. And then there will be a heli supported rig. And the way we'll operate it, and the drilling company we've been working with, so far, and any company that we do work with, will make sure that the rigs are convertible to heli portable. We'll have one rig that's dedicated, to go a bit further afield to these sites that, would have been much more difficult to access via road, and do some heli holes. So that would be the plan at a glance right now. It all depends on what comes back out of the grade and some of these. Maybe we're going to be focusing a lot more in the north. Maybe we're going to be focusing a lot more in the south. And the plan is obviously, a 6-month, 7-month drill program. A lot can change, right? And our priorities can shift, but it's kind of what it's looking like right now. Some systematic step outs from the areas that we know to be good, with a more exploration devoted rig, testing up on geophysical targets and geochemical targets from the field work we've done and the geophysical surveys
I think, Neil, a big caveat there is, we're talking right now with the lumber tenors, and there's a very good chance we could actually get everything clear cut. So if that's the case, we might not need use for a heli rig, so a lot more access. But again, based on what
I don't want to count our chickens there, but fingers crossed, we might not need much heli work until much later in the season.
Look, we've been here for 3 years. Everything's kind of worked out so far, right? Yeah. We've got 2 majors that invested. We seem to be hitting on everything we go for. So I'm always glass half full, but there's a reason for that. But look, also like Neil said, we're gonna have one rig devoted to doing giant step outs. But if we start hitting stuff there, it doesn't mean we can't take one of those rigs and have two rigs focusing there as well. It's just based on what we
Exactly.
see, and there could be multiple centers. And I think one thing Neil didn't mention that we mentioned kind of on the side is, based on what we're seeing, we know there is a jewel box somewhere. It's about finding that source. So that's why we came on the property in the first place. There's a big possibility we can drill deeper holes than we've ever drilled before. I think our deepest hole is 1,034 meters. If we start tagging into stuff, there's no reason why we can't go 1,500 meters.
And Neil, does gold run with bornite and the Golden Triangle? Can you give confirmation of that at this point in time?
Gold is known throughout many porphyry settings to run with bornite. Yes, that's established. It's not as clear cut an association here, but there is definitely gold at NAC and there's definitely bornite at NAC. And we do see, especially out in the country rock and the conglomerates, where we see bornite, we see some really solid gold grades. So yeah, that association is still largely holding a NAC as well.
If anybody has a question for Tony or Neil, we'll take one, maybe two from the audience right now. If you want to speak, ask to be a speaker, and I'll call on you. Tony, so the growth of AE has been phenomenal. Anybody can pull up a 2-year, a 30-month chart and see 2 cents to $1. That's 1 in 1,000 in the junior mining sector. You pulled back a little bit, but still very, very big move for, the company in a short period of time. What is your plan? You're at 100 million now. Let's just call it ballpark. That's your market cap. How do you grow this company to 200 million, 300 million? And, is it, is the growth too fast? Do you need a consolidation period for maybe 6 months or so prior to the next leg higher?
I think we'd say the growth too fast. If these raises were done, doing the typical private placements, but 5 of our last raises were all done. 4 of them were done with majors, and they're holding on to their shares. And the one we did in April was done with 3 major shareholders who are all in there for the long term. So, our plans kind of shifted a bit. It's, you need your stock up for 2 reasons, Rob. And the 2 reasons are to do a raise, to have the capital to actually get to an exit point. You need to share up for the second reason, to do the exit as high as possible. And, right now we're kind of shifting our gears to focusing, how can we get to that exit and what do we have to drill to prove this ore body out to Teck, to South 32, or a third party to eventually take us out. And it's good to have goals. My goal personally is to get to $1 billion valuation. That's always been our goal. And right now I kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel. And sure, we've had a 30x in the last 2 years. So I don't think getting a 10x from this point forward is too tall of a task for us to do. But again, we got to find the zones. We got to keep on drilling. And that's the only thing that's going to get us there. So we have the capital, over, $50 million to spend in the next 3 years. And if it's there, Neil, Charlie, they're going to find it.
$1 billion market cap. Okay, so this is a tough question for you, Tony. What would you rather see happen if you can only have one? Bills win the Super Bowl or AE gets to $1 billion market cap?
AE gets the $1 billion market cap, bar none.
Oh man, so the Bills are going to still be without a Super Bowl win, huh?
It doesn't mean you can't get both. and maybe they'll do it after we get there. Who knows?
Okay. If anybody has a question, I'm down to my final one or two.
And look, forward-looking statements. It's my goal. It's what I want to do. I'm not telling investors we're going to get there. The plan is to get there, but again, I'm not giving you guys tips or anything. That's just our goal that you asked me. I don't want it to get,
Yeah, of course. I mean, you got to have big goals in life, and obviously that's a lofty one. Back to Neil. So I'm looking at slide 6 in the presentation, and I'm looking at, NAC 2433 drill core showing the chalcopyrite and quartz veining. So you just said 10 minutes ago that this hole has some exceptional wide intervals of chalcopyrite with this veining. Can you tell us more about that? And is this core pick, is that what it looks like throughout the hole?
If I'm thinking of the photo you're thinking of, that's definitely not representative of the entire hole. That would be exceptional. There are multiple intervals that do look like that within it. But I think what stood out to us in that hole is the texture of the quartz and the style, like the extensiveness of the hydrothermal breccia throughout that hole. It's not necessarily what you expect to see deep within a porphyry system. It's more akin to what you would find more distal to a porphyry system in the epithermal zone. And so this looks like it's further evidence of either migrating or multiple centers throughout the NAC system. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely be some grade within that. Like there's quite a bit of chalcopyrite. But yeah, it's texturally, geologically, it's really, really compelling to see in, especially where it is down deep in the system like this.
So migrating centers, and does that align with the comments on Tuesday morning that there's a potentially another center further to the north and east? Is that part of that same theory?
Well, yeah, it's either we clearly know it's a long-lived system, right? We see enough different cross-cutting relationships between quite geochemically and texturally distinct dike phases that are all associated with mineralization, that we know there's a prolonged duration of copper enrichment going on at NAC. So one of those possibilities is that there was an event and then there was a separate event following the same structural pathway, bringing in more mineralization, or it's more traditionally telescoped, right? There's coincident tectonic activity with pulses of this magnetism that are resulting in either a deeper migrating or laterally migrating center, while this whole thing is in the process of forming a porphyry deposit. So yeah, we don't exactly know yet. Again, we've just got a few glimpses of this from a drill hole is 4 and a bit centimeters wide, right, of core that you're actually looking at. So, we have to do our best with knowledge of other systems to try and piece this together and come up with what the actual story is here at NAC.
I know you've done some dating of the rocks so far. Will you do more, of the age dating this off season with some of these new holes to the north? And, what's your best guess on how long this system was active for?
I mean, the duration of the system is going to be difficult to pick out from most geophysical methods, right? Like a long-lived system, say we're talking on the 1 million to 2 million year scale, like that can still be within error bars for some of the age dating methods. I think our best hint at that is going to be looking at petrography in more detail and looking at the specific mineralization styles in a bit more detail. And that also works out quite well from a cost perspective, right? Like we can do a full petrographic program with detailed petrographic descriptions from actual petrologists, and that entire program of the cost of getting that done is the cost of 1 or 2 geochron samples. That's not ruling out additional geochronology, but I think we're pretty confident that we've got a younger host rock. We've got Eocene to late Cretaceous host rocks. and definitely Eocene aged intrusions and Eocene age mineralization. So we've got geochron from rhenium osmium dating in the molybdenum, and we've got detrital zircons from the country rock, and we've got several instances of zircons from dikes and the porphyry stock now. So with that information, if we see something that we think is much earlier stage and associated with mineralization, then we're going to want to get an age date on that. But right now it seems like from the relationships we observe, most of the mineralization is coming in around that Eocene age, 51 to 53 million years.
Got it. Okay. So it was active for a couple million years, probably. Final question,
Yeah.
and either of you can take this one. There was some mention of Steve Garwin a few weeks ago. There was some mention of maybe doing a technical presentation with a few, of your geos. Is that something you're still pondering? Like once you have all the results back in, and, you've compiled all the data, you put together the new model. Could we look forward to a technical sort of presentation at some point in 2025?
Yeah, so we're going to do a lot of technical presentations. Charlie just did one yesterday in Vancouver for a bunch of geologists. We recorded it. We're going to overlay a presentation and put it out early next week. And then Neil's doing a presentation at Roundup, a very technical one. Hopefully we have all the assays done by then. And in terms of bringing Garwin or Silito or Alan Wilson in, we're still trying to decide who to bring in. I think one person we know we're going to bring in for sure is Alan Wilson. Alan was the main porphyry expert, and he did all of the DD for porphyries for Newcrest. He was at our property last year. He's really good, works well with their teams, has a lot of experience. He worked under the tutelage of Dick Silito for years. So to have someone that has the continuity and experience, and he was actually at our property the year before doing DD for another big major. So this will be his third season at our property. So having that familiar face and familiar with our rocks is really important. And whether we bring in a Silito or a Garwin, it's just something we're going to have to, probably decide after our assays. I think it's good for media reasons to have, 2 or 3 different experts, but in terms of getting something done, there's a good expression. There's too many cooks in the kitchen sometimes. So 3 different experts, you have 3 different opinions. So sometimes it's just good to have one person and make a decision and start going.
All right. Neil and Tony, thank you so much for your time on this Friday. This will be up on YouTube at Goldfinger Capital this weekend. Thanks everybody for tuning in and have a great weekend. Cheers.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thanks.